Welcome back to the health. Okay, going to start over. Welcome back to the Trust Your Gut podcast with Erica Smith and myself, Nicole Carter. We are going to give you a little change of pace today because Erica and I are always talking before we hit the record button about our businesses, our personal lives, our experience working with people, which we both really love. And we decided today we wanted to bring you some stories because there's so many great success stories that we've seen, and wanted to just share some of the things that you might not be seeing out there when it comes to gut health and how it really impacts overall health. So Erica, I know, you've been doing coaching for a while now too, and focused on the gut health. And I'm sure you have a few stories that come to mind when you're like, what have you seen really profound happen to people when you start to work on their gut?
Absolutely. Yeah. So welcome back, everybody, like Nicole said. And we're going to do a really short one today. So you can listen to this one over and over again, guys. No, I think that, I want to focus on this one particular client that when she came to me, she really was so scared of putting anything in her mouth. She's already been on the table and had some heart work done. And she was eating low salt, no fat, barely having any saturated fats from animals. So she's eating a pretty vegetarian diet that is pretty restrictive. And then every once in a while, she's stressed and stepping out from that diet and having her pizza and all this stuff because she's been good for 2 weeks. So I think that's a lot of what those kind of diets do to people. They put you in this box where you're just so frustrated and stressed and angry at what you're living through. I mean, what a sad place to be at every day of your life.
Miserable. It's just not sustainable either.
No, not at all. So, she was pretty apprehensive when she started with me, and I said, we're going to eat animals, and I'm going to put butter on your food, and you're going to taste the salt.
Yeah. And you're going to like it.
And you're going to like it. Yeah. But the one thing you're not going to do is you're not going to eat outside of the home. So we're going to eat at home. We're going to, for this particular client, I did cook for her. Her meals. And so 5, probably out of the 7 days of the week, she got meals that were prepared by myself. And like I said, I focused on real ingredients that were having foods that had the proper omega ratios, not having any PUFAs, and really, really focused on getting her insulin figured out and her glucose levels figured out because in my opinion, the metabolic resistance or imbalance is really what causes all this stuff. And she really had a lot of heart issues, and their focus was always on that cholesterol. It's like, oh my gosh, the cholesterol. And she kept saying, well, my cholesterol, and I can't have shrimp, and I can't do this. And I'm like, let's just forget about that. And let's think about sugar, right? And reduce all of these things. So we did. And when I look at her lab work specifically on just the hemoglobin A1C, she was above 5.9 from July of 2019 until she started with me. Literally the same month that she started with me, her A1C level started going down, and we got it down to 5.4, which is in the acceptable value.
Yeah.
And that was just 5 months. 5 months. And she has been working with all of these people for over 2 years that I can see. I can't see behind 2019 on her lab work. And her A1C kept increasing and increasing and increasing. But in 2019 and 2020, her triglycerides were good and her cholesterol was good. Let me tell you, between those years was when she had her heart attacks and her issues.
Oh, wow.
Cholesterol is not what we should be looking at. 100%. Just forget about that. If you get your sugar stuff figured out and your A1C figured out, your cholesterol will go down. 100%, it will go in the normal range. So that's always been, and on top of that, obviously she lost so much weight, right? She got back into a normal BMI. She lost, she started at a 29.1 on her BMI, which is right under obese for her. And she went all the way down to 23.
Oh, that's really good.
And I'm talking, you know how I work. I don't over work out, and we're just literally working on foods and
Mhm.
fasting and getting that blood sugar down.
Yeah, it's good. I think those are reasonable strategies for people. The most often, well, I see people that try to do something so extreme, and because they are motivated and they want changes, but it's just not sustainable. And I think this is what really works about this approach. And I think you and I both tackle it the same way, is that, um, you can't, I believe that I heard this somewhere and I totally agree with it, that, food is king and exercise is queen. Like, we need both, but you can't out exercise a bad diet.
Yep.
And most of the people that I've worked with they do not work out that much. They don't have the time, they don't have the experience, they don't want to. It's just not, we're not talking about athletes here. We're talking about the average person that, they sit a lot. They're not very active. So you do have to change the diet to compensate. So, I think being sedentary contributes a lot to the diabetes. And then you couple that with a bad diet, and it's like you're a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, and I want to stress with the whole bad diet, that I think that you and I can agree 100% on this, that the bad diet is the one that's going to mess up your gut, right? Because this person was eating healthy. She said, I eat healthy. I don't do a lot of salt. I don't eat fats, I eat vegetables, and I do this.
We're saying healthy with air
beans.
quotes, right?
Right. Like I have bean burgers all the time and lentil burgers. And I'm thinking, what,
Gut must hate you.
I know. I'm like 5 minutes into the conversation, and I'm like, please control the anxiety attack, because the amount of lectins that this woman is saying is eating. I'm like, I'm surprised she's not at the doctor's table right now, getting cut open.
Right. For that gut issue.
The gut is super important, and it is tough for somebody that's been in that too, because she also had her acid reflux, really bad acid reflux, because she's taking statins, right, which makes it a lot worse.
Yep.
And so, and
statins are terrible for the gut.
Would take proton pump inhibitors,
guys, also terrible for the gut.
And she would say, I have my, and everybody says I have to do this apple cider vinegar. And so I have apple cider vinegar every morning. And I'm just like, it does not matter. It does not matter. If you put all of this stuff in, if your gut has gigantic holes allowing crap, literally crap, because if it doesn't go in there, it ends up in the toilet, people.
Yep.
Then, it's like, what are you doing? The apple cider vinegar is not going to help. And by the way, she is off proton pump inhibitors now.
Oh, thank goodness. Yeah. They really mess with your microbiome.
All she had to do was, suck it up for like about a week, and then it became a lot more manageable. Okay, now she can do her apple cider vinegar if she wants, right? To increase that acidity. Your body will eventually get you there regardless if you're eating a high pH balance or balanced meals. But if you're doing the proton pump inhibitors, you're just going to end up in a really bad spot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
what kind of stories do you have?
Yeah. So I'll share one today, and I'll save, I think maybe we'll do one story each of us, and come back and do another client success stories in between.
We can do that. Yeah.
That's because I've got so many to think of that I'm like, what would be most relevant? But the one that comes to mind, I'm going to say my most dramatic, is a gal that her mom actually contacted me when she was in the hospital with sepsis. So this poor lady was knocking on death's door because basically she had an infection from ulcerative colitis, which can happen. That is typically how people die from that. So she made it through that. She was on a lot of steroids, and prior to working with me, so her mom called me, and right afterwards we started her on some basically gelatin fast. And she did that for only a few days, and immediately stopped bleeding because, you know, ulcerative colitis flare is like fevers and bleeding and bloody stools. It's really awful. And so she, after just a few days of gelatin fasting, she recuperated enough that she was like at home and recovering, and, you know, she was still on medications and stuff, but we worked together for about 4 months. And for the first month, we started to reintroduce foods. But before she had this flare, she was using medications to try to control it, which, you know, you often have breakthrough infections. It doesn't really control it. And she was eating a lot of, I'm going to say like Hispanic foods. So a lot of grains, a lot of corn, a lot of legumes, and probably a lot of dairy. So she was getting the brunt of lectins, oxalates, fibers. And so she wouldn't call herself eating particularly healthy, but basically a lot of starch and probably just feeding a ton of bacteria in the gut. So endotoxins and putting in foods that you cannot digest. You know what I mean? And she was already in an inflamed state, and already then her body is really stressed. So then your digestive fluids are going to be diminished, and it's a whole cascade of things happening. So we started with the not bone broth, but a gelatin fast. And she did great after 3 days. Then we started to incorporate animal proteins. You know, I love to help people build up their microbiome and using different types of foods. But unfortunately, when you have that severe of a situation, there's not a lot you can digest. So you kind of have to go with what you can digest, which at that point is fiber-free foods for most people. So she did wonderful. She did not have any symptoms for the remaining 4 months that we worked together, symptom-free. She actually came off of her steroids. And I don't think she was actually using any medications, but she stayed on a fiber-free diet. And the way we got her glucose was through juice. So we did pulp-free juice with gelatin. And I recommend anybody that has a really severe gut situation, you know, your body does need glucose, your body needs protein, your body really needs glycine, which is the amino acid that helps to kind of stitch the gut back together. And so the healing soups and broths are really amazing for that. So she did really great, and she continued to improve. And we did start to incorporate some fruits, whole fruits, a little bit at a time. But this was life-changing for her because, you know, when you have ulcerative colitis, you have bouts of this bleeding. And, you know, I had it every single day for years. And so it's a really miserable place to be because you're very fatigued. You don't absorb nutrients. You can experience hair loss and, you know, lack of vitamin D and all kinds of different things. So she made leaps and bounds progress just by kind of focusing on the gut and not focusing on trying to suppress symptoms with drugs, but really trying to heal the gut by removing irritants and supporting it with the building blocks. And so that worked really well for her. And she, you know, in the process, she also lost, I think, 25 pounds or so. She was not a particularly obese woman, but she lost 25 pounds and she looked great, and she healed and, you know, has figured out how to take care of her body. So I think that everyone can heal. I really do believe it. And will you heal forever? Could you have a flare again? Possibly, but you know, healing does take time. My experience was I changed my diet, I fixed my gut, and I never had a flare again. But that might not be the case for everybody. I think that is a process, and some people may have a few bumps in the road and you figure out what your stomach can tolerate and you move forward. But I think, you know, it's what has taught me the importance of gut health and how it affects your entire body, all the different areas. And I'd love to tell more stories, but I'll save them for next time because I think of another lady that had severe depression and nobody addressed her gut. They just threw, antidepressants at her and never fixed the gut. So anyway, we'll talk more. We got more stories to give, but that was my experience. One of my best experiences seeing someone heal rapidly from a serious inflammatory bowel condition.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it's interesting with your story that this person was eating all kinds of different foods
Yeah.
and, was unable to process them. And the beans and all of those things have those lectins, and the corn, like we talked about. Also, beans are really high in phytates. And if you don't sprout them
Yep.
properly or soak them, you're not getting any of those nutrients either, because you just cannot absorb them, like you said. And it makes sense. You can't do the fiber initially, right? Because we have to treat the dysbiosis. And I think, you can't go fast when you start growing these colonies or bacteria. There is an issue that happens in the stomach. There's a fight for space, right? And
Yeah.
you don't recognize those bacteria initially and what their byproducts are. And you have to educate your body into absorbing those gases. And so the process does take time, people. You should start with whatever it is that you can process and absorb, like you said, and then move on to adding more things, because you want to create that balance in your gut microbiome. The drugs,
absolutely.
all the antibiotics, they're prohibiting and inhibiting the production of all of the bacteria in general, not just those bad ones. And plus, we call them bad ones, but again, they do serve a purpose in there. If they're there, they just have to be occupying a smaller space of the biome. So very, very important. My client initially did not have the proper bacteria to be able to eat the onions and the garlic and all the stuff. And while she still remained somewhat sensitive to some of those things, right? She can't just eat a fresh cauliflower. She could do a lot more things that she couldn't before. So, and it just
it's a good sign of improvement.
It takes creating that biome in there that is going to, eat the foods that we're giving it.
I wanted to mention one thing on that, because you brought it up, and then we should probably sign off. But I think a lot of people think that going on the elimination diet is fixing the gut, but it's not the end of it, because you do need to be able, if you can't tolerate foods, your gut isn't healed. It's just
100%.
You're omitting the tolerance. So just a side note there that, that's what we're talking about here, is being able to tolerate more foods, not just eliminating what bugs you and then living that way forever.
Yeah. And so I think we are going to sign off. But before we do that, real quick, I do want to say that you cannot go back to the environment that was harming you and expect different results. Doesn't matter what you're doing. If it harmed you to begin with, you shouldn't go back.
Yeah, 100%. Great call out. Well, you guys, I hope you enjoyed these stories. We'll be back with more client success stories in the future. And we'd love to hear your feedback. If you have requests for topics for our podcast, we'd like to hear that too. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you all real soon.
Bye.
Bye.